Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome back to the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is James Martin, and we're going to start with, a rumour that's sort of come a bit out of left field over the last couple of days, really. We've not heard much of the name Dominic Szoboszlai before that, James, have we? And I just want to get your initial thoughts on Liverpool's interest in him.
Well, to be fair, anyone who reads Liverpool.com probably has heard the name Dominic Szoboszlai quite a lot, particularly Ben Bokszak has been on that train for a while. But in terms of solid transfer links, no, it has certainly come a bit out of the blue. Maybe I've just bought into Ben's hype of him, but it certainly got me excited that we might actually be looking at him. He looks a really exciting talent. Obviously, still very young. I think he's 22. Come through the Red Bull system. That's always a big tick in Liverpool's recruitment boxes. But yeah, he's you look at these sort of twin number 8 roles that Klopp's kind of implemented in the latest system, and you think it's almost made for someone like that. People were saying similar about Mason Mount, weren't they, earlier in the summer? He now obviously looks unlikely, but Szoboszlai is a similar sort of profile in a lot of ways. He might be a little bit cheaper even with that release clause, given what Chelsea are asking for Mount. So yeah, it's a really appealing deal. It's I don't know whether it'll get done, but it's certainly one that it makes a lot of sense that Liverpool are looking at it.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned Mount there, because that sort of brings me on to something I wanted to ask you about. Since McAllister came in, obviously I think he got 10 goals in the league for Brighton last year. Some of them penalties, obviously, but Liverpool have sort of been looking at a more defensive-minded midfielders. It certainly seems, anyway, with links to Thuram, Kone, people like that, Barella even. But obviously, yeah, Szoboszlai, much more of an attacking midfielder, like you say, sort of in the mould of a Mason Mount. Do you think it sort of represents a shift in what Liverpool are trying to do with their midfield targets this summer?
It's an interesting one because I sort of think that a lot of people going into the summer were thinking, we're going to be linked with specialist number 6s, because you look at the problems last season and you do kind of have to look at Fabinho. He had a bit of that revival towards the end when Trent was tucking in and helping him out. But, does that bode well for sort of the long-term future as him as the number 6? I think a lot of people were thinking maybe it's time. He's served us excellently well. You don't want to be shooting your mouth off about Fabinho because he's been one of the key cogs in so much success. But, the fact is he's played an awful lot of football in his career, and it did just look like he was tired for basically the whole season, to be honest. So I think a lot of us were expecting those kind of links going into the window, but they've never really materialised. You mentioned Kone. He's probably the deepest of the players we've been properly linked with, but I still wouldn't really call him a number 6. He's sort of more of a kind of slightly further forward, but with that defensive side to his game. I think he has played as a number 6, but again, not that kind of specialist figure like someone like Fabinho would be. And then Thuram as well, I'd have him in the kind of box-to-box mould. So again, kind of a number 8. But yeah, you're right to say that Szoboszlai is that kind of 8/10 rather than 6/8. So I suppose in that sense, maybe it's a little bit of a shift. The good thing with McAllister, you mentioned his goals, but he's also played as a number 6. So he has that kind of versatility to be used across the midfield, really, and kind of gives Klopp some options in terms of what he wants to do with that. But yeah, I think based on all of the targets, really, the recruitment does seem to be in those 2 positions, primarily in front of Fabinho. And, maybe someone like McAllister can give him a rest from time to time. Obviously, we can't forget Bajcetic either. There's high hopes for him. But yeah, I don't think the plan has changed with Szoboszlai. I just think it's a slightly different profile. And I don't think you can underestimate his defensive work rate either. It's I suppose you'd say similar with Mount. They're both sort of willing to put in that kind of dirty work, even though you associate them a lot more with kind of end product in the final third. They do put in a shift. They're sort of typical Klopp players in that respect, typical Red Bull player in the case of Szoboszlai. So yeah, I suppose the plan is to get number 8s who do have those defensive instincts and then can maybe protect Fabinho or whoever is behind those number 8s a little bit more.
Yeah, Klopp, when they got McAllister in, was sort of keen to emphasise that obviously while he's good going forward, this guy can do it all. His defensive recovery numbers last season were really impressive. I know. We'll get on to Szoboszlai's price because there's some debate around this. Supposedly, there's a bit of an argument going on over whether his £60 million release clause expires on the June the 30th or whether it's mid-July. So, obviously, it's obvious how much easier it is to get a player in if there is a release clause there. Just how much more difficult do you think it would be for the Reds to get a deal over the line if that release clause does expire, tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, it would be much more difficult, wouldn't it? But I suppose it depends whether Liverpool think it's a fair price in the release clause, because much as they make deals easier, they're not necessarily good value. I mean, you look at Spain in particular, where I think you have to put release clauses into contracts. So, you have players with like 1 billion release clauses. So obviously they're not getting triggered left, right, and centre because they don't represent good value. So Liverpool won't get trigger happy just because there's a release clause that expires. They won't go, we have to act, like you say, within the next 24 hours. Like, I think they're not going to be rushed into that. But yeah, on the other side of the coin, you have Leipzig, who can very easily say, well, we won't sell him unless someone meets the clause. That's why you put these clauses in, and he's obviously a very good player for them, very important player. They have got Carvalho going the other way, who plays in a similar position, but then they did lose Christopher Nkunku to Chelsea. So you look at it and think that they're not going to be desperate to sell by any means. They're not going to want to lose one of their better performers. So I could see them insisting on the clause, but at the same time, I could see Liverpool not getting pressured by the clause, taking their time over the summer and getting them to the negotiating table and seeing if they can bring that down. But I mean, even I think it was Fabrizio Romano who says it expires tomorrow. He did say that it then sort of reactivates for the January. So, if Liverpool did come to the conclusion a bit late that they were happy to pay that money, then maybe it's one that they can sort of do now with an eye on January. Who knows? But yeah, I don't think the clause really changes things too much, but it's obviously an interesting, complicating factor.
Yeah, and I mean, with this one, as we said earlier, sort of having come out of left field, not much interest from the Reds, at least in the public eye. Certainly not on social media until the last couple of days, really. I mean, a lot of people were wondering sort of how much stock to put into this one. I mean, there's a lot of rumours flying about. There's 200 million euro bids for Kylian Mbappe supposedly being prepared. I mean, we discussed that one yesterday. Again, if you think that one's happening, I don't really know what to tell you. But yeah, I mean, how much stock do you think people can put in this latest link?
Well, all you can go off is the quality of the reporters saying it, really, and obviously it's come from the Athletic. It's come from Ornstein, who's got a good track record. So, I mean, you should also read the manner in which he reports it. Is very much not this is an advanced situation. He says there's an understanding that Liverpool know it'll be very difficult to get it done. So yeah, I wouldn't be getting Szoboszlai on the back of the shirt yet. Certainly not, because it's pretty expensive with all those letters. But it's. I think you can say with confidence, having seen those reports, that the interest is there. I don't think you can go too much further than that. And then, once the Athletic went on it, you saw a couple of other normally solid sources coming out and saying the same thing, corroborating that. I think Paul Joyce mentioned it afterwards as well. So that's always a decent sign. Yeah, so I think it's not an Mbappe for 300 million euros situation, put it that way. I think there's some substance to it, but we're a long way from saying it's a goer.
Yeah, and I mean, like you say, it would certainly be a difficult deal to get done. We'll move on to a deal that would be, I mean, even more difficult, probably impossible to get done. And speaking of £1 billion transfer release clauses, supposedly Eduardo Camavinga, not supposedly, he has extended his contract until 2028 with Real Madrid, but supposedly Liverpool being interested in acquiring his services, what might have been one of the contributing factors behind Real deciding to sign him up. His release clause has gone from a very affordable 700 million up to a billion. As we said, you've got to have those in La Liga. And I mean, like I said, unrealistic deal, never going to happen. But Real Madrid and Liverpool's midfields do sort of seem just intertwined at the moment. I mean, you've got Tchouaméni, who they nicked offers, Camavinga, who we're supposedly interested in. Bellingham, did they nick him off us? Not really, because we decided we couldn't afford him in the first place. And I mean, we discussed yesterday morning on the stream a supposed £77 million bid for Federico Valverde. I mean, if Liverpool were going to manage to pry away one of those young midfielders from Real Madrid, James, I mean, ideally, who would you like, and who do you think is maybe the most realistic option, if any of them at all?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Liverpool are just annoyed that Real Madrid have been so greedy with hoarding midfielders, and they're just trying to take anyone they can get now. Bellingham's arrived, doesn't it? I wouldn't put too much stock in any of them, but in terms of the one I'd pick, if in an ideal world, I think it would probably be Tchouaméni. He was obviously wanted by the club last summer. That's an open secret at this stage. he has that capacity that we were talking about earlier to play in the number 6 role, but he has the versatility to play in the number 8. So I guess in a similar bracket to McAllister in that sense, but almost the other way round, if you like defence first, but with the capability to operate a bit further forward as well. So I think at a stroke, he would sort of solve any problem that there is around Fabinho, and then would also give that option of playing further forward. He could even play with Fabinho. It just gives a lot of options straight away in that midfield. Still very young as well, so you're looking at things like the potential there. And I think if I had to pick the most realistic, it would probably also be that one, to be honest. He played a reasonable amount last season, but not as much as he would have liked. I think in recent weeks, Modric and Kroos have both renewed for another year, so they're not going anywhere just yet. Obviously, Real will be looking for the future because they're not going to be around forever. But even once you move them on, you're still looking at Camavinga, you're looking at Bellingham, you're looking at Valverde. I mean, we've seen Camavinga play left back quite recently. We've seen Valverde play on the right wing. So, there are ways they can shoehorn them all into the team. But there'd be nothing wrong with that trio by any means as their, long-term midfield. So, in a sense, that does leave Tchouaméni potentially a little bit surplus, particularly if they are trying to raise money for someone like an Mbappe. So, yeah, I don't think it'll happen. But if I had to pick the most realistic, it's probably him.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you were picking the most realistic one that was going to leave Madrid this summer, I think it would be Tchouaméni. I think if I had my pick of them, I think I would probably just about go Valverde, just because I know he's got a goal in him, and I love that from a midfielder. But that is all we've got time for here on the Morning Bulletin today. So, James, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.